It all comes down to this. This is what makes all the magic happen. This is going to be the game changer for this. All right, guys, welcome back, Stupid Fast Nation. Hope y'all are having a great week and weekend. Yeah, looking around, you can tell I definitely wasn't kidding you in the last video when I said I picked up a 2012 Yamaha R1 engine. Yes, let's just cut right to the chase on this one. That is actually the Crossplane engine. We're going to be swapping it into a yfz450. Now, this is going to be quite a challenge. I can see there's not a ton of room in these yfz450 chassis, but I chose it basically for two reasons. One is the Raptor 700 is probably the most sought after quad to do swaps in for a variety of reasons, but the biggest reason being the frame opening is much more taller than something like a yfz450. So the street bike engines fit in there much nicer. But yeah, I don't like to do what everybody else does, so we're gonna change it up. I love the look of the yfz450, and I know these can be swapped in there well, anything can be done with a grinder and a welder, let's be honest, guys. So anyways, with that being said, let's get started on swapping this 2012 Yamaha R1 Crossplane engine into this yfz450 and making it the baddest motherfucker you've ever seen. All right, guys, so before we get cracking on building this incredible ATV, as you can see, I got the entire, well, I didn't do it, but I got the frame, the subframe, the swing arm, and then also the A-arms prepped and ready for powder coat, because you guys know that I wasn't gonna leave this thing looking all ratchet, right? We're gonna build something decent. So with that being said, today's sponsor of the video is Northeast Mobile Blasting. Those guys took really good care of your boy. If you guys are in the Pennsylvania area and you need any type of blasting or surface removal done on any different types of, powder coat, paint, and things of that general nature, I highly recommend you look below me, both in the description and in my top comment. I will have contact information listed. They have very good prices, very good turnaround times. If you guys need something in this general neighborhood, please do not hesitate to give them a call. Super friendly, super easy to work with. Guys, with that being said, let's get started with the build. Now, I was kind of doing some eye measurements as I was placing the subframe and swing arm into position. And I'll tell you, I did a couple little things to the frame, just kind of trying to get things ready before I start doing like crazy modifications to this thing. I got the steering nut and bearing out of this thing, which it was literally a nightmare to do. I custom make tools to get those out, and I actually wound up welding my tool to the nut to be able to put a 1/2-inch breaker bar and pole on top of that to be able to stand on it to break it. So 250 pounds pushing down on that bad boy. My Milwaukee impact could not break that sucker. So anyways, we got that out. Then I had to custom make a piece to punch the bearing out, because the center of the bearing, it got stuck in there because the inner race got punched out of it, because somebody didn't know how to uninstall these properly. Anyways, that's most likely the cause anyways, but we got that all taken out. That's taken care of. The swing arm was actually from a 2009 yfz450. I had to trim that, make a custom deal for that. We have to make a spacer for the center of that yet. So then that will kind of make that rigid, because the motor will not be going into the swing arm at all, and we don't want those spacers sliding around. so that the needle bearings and the bushings inside of there aren't getting any contact, you know. Sprocket alignment looks great. With the sprocket roller, I did take a straight edge and kind of line that up real good, so that's pretty squared away. Carrier's in place. So basically the whole rear end of this is tight and in position and ready for the engine to align with that. With that being said, we have a little bit of work to do on the motor, so let's go ahead and hop over to there real fast. Before we can start mating this engine into its new home, we have to remove some things that we don't need, like the header, radiator, and various other components first. Fun fact, the 2012 Yamaha R1 street bike makes 180 horsepower at 12,500 RPMs. If you think this thing is going to haul ass, drop me a comment, like, share, and if you're not already subscribed, do so I can keep building cool stuff like this for you guys. Damn, who got time to wait for the engine hoist to go up, man? It's way easier to just pick this bitch up. Alright guys, so now that we got the engine completely stripped down, basically ready to be implanted into our yfz450 chassis, I've spent some good time here in my thinking chair, kind of wondering like how I should go about doing this. There's a million ways to skin a cat. Everybody does it differently. You know, I've seen some crazy off the wall stuff like people taking a section of a street bike frame, putting it into the four-wheeler or ATV or dirt bike or whichever frame, and then welding it and making it fit that way. I've seen other people cut them out, custom make their own frame, insert like Vasily did, and I think that's gonna be the way that we also approach this. I think we're gonna start by cutting out this entire middle section of the bottom half of the frame because we will not use any of this for this R1 motor essentially. So we'll cut all of that out, get the motor in position. I already shimmed the frame, basically put it on its own stand with wooden blocks. I'm gonna pull the motor in, get that kind of lined up where I want it. This left side, or the driver's side of the ATV, we're gonna make this side solid so that it cannot come out ever. So all the engine mounts and everything on the left side will be solid, and everything on the right side of the frame is going to be removable. And I will show you guys, I got these nice little tube, like roll cage tube pieces here. They're meant for roll cages, 1 inch inner diameter. And then this will help that side be detachable. So if we ever need to work on this motor, which we are going to be working on this motor here, as soon as we get it mocked up in the frame and ready for powder, we'll have to do a complete teardown on it anyways. So I need it to be removable no matter what. And that also is the correct way to go about doing this, in my opinion, because you're gonna need to work on stuff over time, or maybe the next owner or whoever might potentially get their hands on this in the future might also need to do some work on the R1 engine. So who knows, forged internals, they wanna put turbos on it. I don't know, crazy amounts of horsepower ideas in my head. But with that being said, let's go ahead and start getting this cut apart, and we'll start getting the new pieces put in, and we'll get this motor mocked up and get this thing ripping and running. Let's get it going, guys. Let the chaos and destruction begin. Wait, John, you were supposed to say design and fabrication, what the hell? Well, let's just start cutting, how's that sound? We need to begin by cutting out sections of the frame to mock up the engine and start lining things up like the sprocket, which is pretty important. While I'm doing this, I'm trying to think through every little detail I can. Like, where is the shifter going to land? How is the coolant line routing going to run? Radiator placement, exhaust, intake, anything that needs to be here to make this engine run, I have to try and think through how to get it all into and onto this ATV chassis efficiently and effectively. And most importantly, it's gotta look cool, right? Before we can start bending some tubing, I was test fitting some pieces together and noticed our roll cage pieces do not fit into our tube ends. So we have to machine those down on the lathe to get a nice snug fit before we do any mock-up or welding. Now that we got the engine into a rough position inside the frame, we got the sprockets lined up with our string, and it's now time to start laying out some frame rails and try to be as semi-methodical about the approach here, so that way we can make sure the fitment and also the aesthetics are appealing as well. I'll start by cutting some 1 1/4 inch outer diameter mild steel tubing with an 1/8 inch wall thickness and get some rough lengths cut so we can start bending and shaping our pieces to what we want them to be. Pro tip, when you're starting your design, never finish weld anything until it's all together and you are absolutely sure there aren't going to be any issues. I can't tell you how many times I have fully welded something and then went, man, I wish I didn't do that yet so I can move it. This is why we tack weld things into position first. When you're using a Harbor Freight bender, there's a few different methods you can use to not kink your pipes. You can plug the ends and fill it with sand, which I personally think takes too long, or you can give her some heat where you're going to be putting the bend, so it encourages a nice pro bend. I like the heat and the essence of saving time, so this is what I do personally to prevent any issues. Doing this bottom bend, and looking back on it now, I wish I would have moved the joint up just a few more inches, and did a tighter bend to the engine. However, you probably won't see it underneath the foot peg anyways, so I'm really just overthinking it like I always do, or am I just looking for ways to improve everything? With the right side frame rails tacked up into position, I'm very happy with the outcome of the bending and placement. It looks like there's enough clearance for everything, the foot pedal for the rear brake, and also plenty of room up front for the exhaust and radiator. I'm ready to move on to the next part. Now we're going to do a half weld to secure everything, so if we jiggle something, there won't be any issues with tacks coming undone and causing any issues. Alright guys, check it out. I want to show you one or two things real fast before we get moving on with the yfz450. Let's talk about some things real fast. Alright guys, so check it out. This is the progress so far, as you guys have been watching, right? We did the 3 disconnects, one here, one here, one here, and I faced them all upwards, so that way when you remove these 3 bolts, this piece will literally just go phew and come right off. You shouldn't have any issues with them binding or anything like that. And then I also face them upwards because that will allow, when this bolt is in here, holding the side of the engine, it will push down, in which case it will put the weight on the flat. Now, if I turn these any which way, it will put a lot of tension on the bolt and the threads holding everything together, because then it would be allowed to move. Not necessarily move, but create like a sideways force on the bolt, basically. So I did this with purpose. And then also, the bottom of the frame here, I had to kind of put this guy underneath the frame, because we are going to be using all of the engine mounts on this, because this thing's going to be making close to 200 horsepower. So we are going to cut this out right here, box this in, put some gussets in here, and then allow for a bolt to go through that motor mount. We'll have plates go into the frame on both sides, and also on this guy up here, and then on the other side, obviously, but that will take care of this. That is why I decided to do things the way I did it on this. I just wanted you guys to know. All right, guys, now that we got the right side, the hardest part of getting the right side of the engine done, we're gonna move to the left side. I wanted to get these two front mounts done first and foremost before doing the other engine mounts, because that will solidify the frame and will only let the engine rotate up and down on the back, basically hinging on those bolts. And that will allow us to take the string off of here and not have to really worry about this motor shifting out of place with the sprocket alignment. And that, to me, is one of the most crucial details of any swap, any engine swap, motor swapping that you do, lining up the sprocket. Because if that's not right, you can't deliver the power to the rear wheels, which is literally the goal here. So, with that being said, we're gonna get started on the left side. We're gonna go ahead and make a mount for this. Get this mounted in, then we're gonna start bracing in the frame, get the rest of the mounts done, and then so we can move on to getting this thing ripping and riding. Let's freaking go, guys. With the right side out of the way, it's time to focus on the important side. I like to start by taking some rough measurements, and the pro tip here is to add a good 4 or 5 inches onto any cut. If you're going to bend it that way, you have room for the actual bends, so it's not too short in the bender to reach the other side. This process takes a long time because there are several bends for this pipe, and I got a little bit smarter each time I fit a pipe because I don't use a degree. I just do a lot of things by eye because that's how I've always done it. Although I think at some point I'd like to get a degree tool for angle measuring, and also those cool little tools that help you decide where to put the actual hole saw cut too. Yeah, those are tools I definitely need on my list of to-gets. You can always add to a bend, but you can't take away from the bend you already did without ruining the structure of the steel.
We got our windows down, driving down the 405, sing along to the radio. We're gonna make it someday, nothing's gonna get in our way. We will be the biggest band in town. Round and round the world we'll go, putting on the greatest show. So make sure that you don't miss out, just be there. We're taking our shot, bring what you got. We're going all the way to the top. We will hear the sound of 1 million people screaming our names when we're backstage. We'll play loud, surfing the crowd. Everybody's jumping around. Yeah, that's the place where I wanna be. Going on stage headline on a Saturday night. Oh.
Alright, so I know a handful of you come to this channel to learn how to build cool stuff like this 1000cc swapped R1 yfz450, yfz450, whatever you want to call this thing. So I know you guys come here, some of you come here to see how things are built, and I'm here to pass on some of my knowledge to you guys. One of the things I'd like to teach you in this video is I believe it's called a Rosset style joint. When building tube chassis stuff like this, I've seen a lot of marketplace finds where people butt tubes up against each other and then weld around the seam of the tube. That is extremely weak way to join tubes together. We're going to talk about a Rosset style where you slide the tube into its mate here. So like this pipe we just made, for instance, I'm going to slide this into the frame and then I'm going to weld around the outside here. That's one way you can do it. The Rosset style though is you drill a hole through this guy, slide that in, and then weld the hole shut, and then also weld around the seam. And usually you would do this on both sides of the tube. That way you have even pressure from both sides of the tube hanging on to that thing. And then also, if you can't slide it into the tube, I purposely used this size tubing to fit into the frame of the YFZ. On the front side, it's a 1 inch. You can't slide that in there. So I made some sleeves to go inside this tube, and then also a little sleeve I machined out to go inside the tube of the YFZ, so that when these go together, when the holes are drilled and everything, this piece of tube will be inside of here, actually making that much more rigid and stiff. So if there's an impact or something else of that nature happens, we don't have to worry about the frame basically falling apart. You know, and that's really the big thing here. Or, you know, this left side of the ATV is probably the most important part, because this is your drive side with the engine, the chain, the sprockets, right? All of your horsepower goes through the left side of the frame. So that is why we're making this side rigid and making the other side able to take the engine out, because I don't want there to be any reason for this motor to shift or bend this frame in any way, shape, or form. We're gonna be making a good bit of horsepower here, stock 180 horsepower. We go and get this thing tuned with an open exhaust, we're probably looking upwards of 200 horse. So that's a lot of horsepower for a frame that was only designed for 40 to 50 horsepower. We're quadrupling the power output of this machine, and I wanna make sure it's rigid, safe, and reliable. And this is one way that you can step up your fabricating game. Go out there, do some raw set joints, and let me know in the comments below.
I just wanna play my rock and roll like they do on the radio. Tommy's got brand new drums, and I still have my old guitar. And John said this next song's gonna be real good, if you know what I mean. Round and round the world we'll go, putting on the greatest show. So make sure that you don't miss out, just be there. We're taking our shot, and what you got, we're going all the way to the top. We will hear the sound of 1 million people screaming our names when we're...
Oh my God, look what I got on my freaking...
Oh. Crowd, everybody's jumping around. Yeah, that's the place I wanna be. On a Saturday night. We'll go, putting on the greatest show. So make sure that you don't miss out, just be there. Oh, just be there. We're taking our shot, bring what you got. We're going all the way to the top. We will hear the sound of 1 million people screaming our names when we're backstage. We're playing loud, surfing the crowd. Everybody's jumping around. Yeah, that's the place where I wanna be. Going on stage, headline on a Saturday night. Oh, 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 Saturday night. Oh, oh, oh.
Since the process is going to be exactly the same for the last pipe, I'm not going to drag everyone through that again. We'll just skip to the good parts and show you the final results before moving on to the rear mounts. All right, guys, so now that we got the front of the engine mounts and basically the cradle for the engine complete, that literally is the hardest part of building this, in my opinion. Other people might disagree with that. I think this is definitely the most challenging piece, getting the sprocket lined up, getting your front cradle and everything built, and getting the frame prepared to nestle this engine in there. So now that we got that done, we can move on to some other things. We're going to mount this back. There's a piece on the back of the engine here that on the street bike would go in the middle of the frame. We're gonna run some tabs. We're gonna run a tube going across here, run some tabs down, and then run this bolt all the way through to the other side, put a nut on it so that way the back of the engine also has 2 mounts. And then on the bottom of the engine, we have 1 more mount, but I need to finish up the top mount first, get that fully situated, and then we can go to the bottom mount because I have to actually pull the engine out to cut some of this frame out and to measure for the tabs and stuff like that and box the rest of this bottom corner over here. And then we can put the bottom mounts on and then do a final weld of, you know, because these are only 3/4 welded, or not even 3/4, like half, maybe less than half welded, just to hold them, you know, pretty much in place until I can get to all those little nooks and crannies once the engine is out of the way. So with that being said, let's move on to the next stage. Let's get the rest of these engine mounts done so that way we can keep flowing on this build. Let's get it, guys. The process for the rear 2 mounts is pretty much the same. Measure twice, cut once, or maybe a few times, but always measure twice. Tack weld the pipe in, make some paper mounts that we can then take to the plasma cutter, and then refine the rough plasma cuts with a grinder and a bench grinder and a drill with a bit. Then once everything is mounted, lay a few nice welds down to secure everything in place, and then we can pull the engine out to finish weld everything. One other thing I had to do here was make custom bolts to fit the rear engine mounts. Thankfully, I used to part out machines and Chevy trucks, so I have a very large abundance of longer bolts here that I can cut and rethread. What the hell is this shit? Chinese junk, man. Alright guys, and now that we got all 4 of the upper engine mounts put into position, everything is, you know, half welded is what I call it, but it's just enough of a weld to hold things in place so that when you go back to do your finish welding, that you could really focus on getting all of those nooks and crannies. Now with all 4 of those done and out of the way, it's time to test to see if we can take this bar off and move the engine forward, and that's going to be what helps us access the 2 back bottom engine mounts to be able to create flanges and get a bolt through those as well. So let's go ahead and see if this thing will come off of here or if we're going to be stuck in the mud spinning our wheels here. It should just be that bolt and these 3 little bolts and we should be good to go. These are just nylock nuts and an Allen key bolt, really. Very simple stuff here, guys. Nothing groundbreaking going on. There's the, oh man, she's already loose. I'm liking the looks of this already. Yeah, you know, when it starts coming off before you even finish, look at that. And now the engine should be able to slide right out. Let's set this back here real quick. And then I already took this back bolt out and the left side bolt out before hitting record. And then that way I could actually test to see. So, oh yeah, she'll come right out of there. This is a heavy motor. This is a very heavy motor. And the thing is, you have to slide it forward past those mounts, and then it'll literally just come right out. You have to get it past that and those, boop, boop, and she'll come right out. There's plenty of room. I mean, you've got like almost a foot in between the front of the engine and the back of the frame here, and there's nothing else going in there. So that's pretty simple. With that being said, give me a few minutes here. Let me get this thing shifted forward so we can start accessing those back mounts and start working on those. Let's get those done, and that'll finish up today's yfz450R video. All right, guys, and as you can see, after just a few minutes, this motor is back into position. All the bolts are back in. The top bolts, the two here, and then also my back two, technically two because there's two flanges there, but one bolt. And then so now we got to work on this bottom guy. You can see I cut out some of the skid plate mount. I want to leave that there in case I want to make a skid plate for underneath of this thing. I'll probably weld 2 more tabs up here later on, and then that way we can do a skid plate underneath of this thing to protect the oil pan essentially. The other thing was I restrung the string, and ran that back so that we could do a test and make sure that this is in the same perfect alignment, or the alignment that I had it at. And you can see we're pretty dang close. I tried wiggling the motor around a little bit, but you can see just a tiny bit right here. Maybe a 1/16 if you're lucky. And it's only half the sprocket. So we're not really off cue. And back here we're golden. We're spot on back here. So chain is still in alignment. We're good to go. Let's get these bottom 2 mounts made, and then we can finish weld everything and get it ready for powder coat. We've also, well, actually we still have a lot of work to do before it's ready for powder coat, but getting the engine mounted is literally the biggest task we have to do. So let's go ahead and get that finished up. All right, I made my paper mounts, and I'm ready to finish up fabricating the mounts for this yfz450R and let this engine rest. Let's get her done. All right, so now that we got the engine mounted, I'm pretty happy. Now, you might ask, John, why are you going through all of this effort to build something so unique and so stupid powerful like this 200 horsepower yfz450? Well, I'm thinking about, well, not thinking about, I am going to Sandwars in Little Sahara, Oklahoma. And I believe the date is October 9th to October 12th. I'm gonna be taking cameraman Wes with me, and I would like to take this and the Banshee with and do a bunch of racing and riding and just meet a bunch of you guys and have a whole hell of a lot of fun. I don't think I'm gonna win any classes or anything like that, but I do think it'll be one hell of a lot of fun, and I do think we can make it. We've got about a month and a half left. Month and a half, somewhere in there, to get this fully completed. We already in the first video got the engine completely mounted. In the next video, we're going to tie the frame back into the front of our frame, basically. We're gonna mount the radiator, we're gonna get our battery tray in, we're gonna get our intake set up, and we're gonna get all this stuff wired up. I don't think we'll get a first start in the next video. Maybe, we'll see. You'll just have to stick around and find out for yourself. Guys, if you like this kind of content, you like seeing these crazy epic builds that Vasily inspires me to do all the time, drop me a comment below. Let me know how you feel. You like it? You don't? Cool, not cool, sad, happy, mad, angry, all the same to me. Let me know in the comments below. But for now, that completes today's YFZ1000R video. Thanks for coming. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Peace out.